And of course, everything got messed up. Quickly, while I make these adjustments in Skype, I'm going to go ahead and do the intros right now. So this is the Runeterra Report LPL episode 2. With me, we have Gosu Gamers Drexen, Mike, crew leader right here on the leftmost side. On the far right side, we have Kelsey, LPL, esports specialist. In the middle, again, forgive me, I'm going to be fixing these calls in a bit when we get into conversation. On the far side, again, Kelsey, Bjorknen, Moser, LPL specialist for Riot. In the middle, unfortunately not with us, is Hubo, the Mundoverse editor. Huge thank you for Mundoverse for giving us this platform to speak about LPL. And again, just to kind of kick this off so I can work with the technical difficulties, right now on the screen it shows Chinese chicken. I will be changing topics as we cycle through. Last week we spoke a little bit about kind of like the availability of LPL because it was the first episode, why it's hard to find LPL, and just kind of like the basics to work up into it. This week it's going to be a little bit more just diving straight into it. I wanted to talk about, or get you guys to talk about, what I call the Chinese chicken. So in every single LPL game, and it's starting to leak over into the other regions now, we have this this base race essentially of teams will go top lane, they'll push down the first two. It's like a race to an inhibitor. And we saw this morning actually in OGN that an inhib actually went down at like 8 minutes. You had Jax trying to fight off super minions. Why do you think that is happening? Is it, I've heard ward trinkets, teleport, is it a accumulation of everything? And how is it affecting the Chinese meta?
Well, actually, Chinese have been kind of pioneering this before it was even like the cool thing to do, just because they're so adamant about grouping. But the main thing is, yeah, definitely the trinket changes. Basically make it so the safest thing to do is to invade with your group and stay grouped up, because there's no vision to tell and scout out lane swaps. So even if you have an unfavorable matchup or a favorable matchup, it doesn't really matter. The safest thing to do is invade and then go for a 4-man push in a tower because you're guaranteed results. It's kind of a volatile meta just because, you know, if you don't end up getting a tower before the other person, you pretty much are screwed for that game. The only time this has been an exception is actually in Korea, because they've learned to work around it and, like, you know, freeze their lane. In China, it's still like an issue. It's kind of like, seems like whoever gets the inhibitor tower down first has like a massive advantage. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty widespread thing. It's not really unique to LPL, but it is definitely something that started in LPL, because even in the very beginning of the split, where China started several patches behind on 3.14, or what, 3.15, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was pretty prominent. So
yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment. I think because they're so good at grouping. So I guess what I understand from it is what happens since the trinket changes have been so delayed to 2 minutes, people start grouping with their jungler to try to protect him, and since they're already grouped, they can go to the towers, and then with the added teleport change, it's easier to get across the map, and this creates a situation where everyone's grouped. Okay, let's go take towers, and then they just race to take towers. But I think that there's also another factor to this that was present since the very beginning of Season 4, which is that dragons no longer really amount to that much gold. So obviously the most valuable objectives on the map are going to be the towers. So early game. So you just rush for the towers, you get that early spike in power, and so it's pretty much worth it, even if the enemy team also gets the same thing. So that's kind of the issue. Like, you can't, what are you going to give up for taking those early towers? Dragons, first blood? Like, that's the objective everyone's going to go for, right? So.
And actually, to add on to the value of Dragon, there's actually, you know, the game with EDG and Positive Energy. Even though EDG got the tower, the inhibitor tower, and PE like backed off early, EDG actually transitioned that, since they're on blue side, they transitioned that into a dragon. And even with the dragon, first blood for PE actually made them come out on top in gold values over EDG. So yeah, it's definitely a huge influence from the weakness of dragon's early gold, for sure.
And kind of talking about it and continuing forward with that, the Chinese chicken kind of like new meta or new flavor of the month as it's come into. What do you think that translates into jungles? We've seen pretty much Kha'Zix is banned every single game. You have a lot of junglers in China that are really good Kha'Zix players. They like the aggression. A lot of times you'll see Chinese teams will pick up more so the assassin and run more of a utility mage. This isn't true for every team, but we've seen it. how do you think that this is faring? Because you have a lot of Eve picks, and you have a lot of Eve first picks, and I think that it allows them to safely do that, because essentially, normally Lee Sin would be picked into an Eve, and Lee Sin would just walk into the jungle and just destroy Eve. But because we're doing like this 4v4 or this 4 split push top thing, I think it completely eliminates early danger for junglers like that. I mean, would you agree with that? Do you think the junglers are going to change? Do you think Feral Flame is going to ever become a part of the Chinese meta?
I'll chime in and say I actually don't think Feral Flame is going to be a huge impact in China, mostly because, well, it's not so much that they don't farm the jungle. It's just that they're very campy and really predictable with how they gank. So you get a lot more benefit from the instant gratification of Elder Lizard, as well as, the CDR, the armor pen and stuff helps a lot. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal. Also big in China is Pantheon, obviously. I mean, they're the OGs of the pick, but Pantheon essentially allows you to push pretty well, clear waves, and you can get pretty much anywhere on the map, which is really invaluable, especially now that teleports received the buff. So that's how I feel about the current situation of junglers in China.
Yeah, I can see Clear Love buying Feral Flare for sure, because that's kind of his deal, as he farms. Like, traditionally, he farms a lot. I don't really like Feral Flare. I can sort of see people buying it now because of how unsure they are of what to do, like what their rotation, the correct rotation should be. After they push those two turrets, teams seem to go, okay, now what? And there's a lot of wandering around the map and random fighting. But I think that because, like, I guess we didn't really see it that much in the EDG versus OMG games. Like, we saw a lot of picks in those games. But in a bunch of the other games, like the Positive Energy game, Positive Energy games versus EDG, for example, there was more early fighting, I would say. And so, like, a Feral Flare could put you behind, like, before you get the Feral Flare farmed up, you're a little bit behind in combat stats. So, again, the instant gratification of the Spirit Stone. But I could see, like, sort of in this sort of limbo state where no one's really sure what to do in that period after you take all the top turrets and bottom turrets. What do we do now? I can see people building that Feral Flare, like, for the time being, until someone decides, okay, this is what we're doing. This is the next play that we can make.
Just really curious why it hasn't been picked up, since there is like such a superficial spike in mid-game power due to the earlier, it's like the global gold rush is what it is. You get as many towers down as quickly and spike that advantage early, which kind of like segues into my next point. I really wanted to talk about the OMG versus the EDG game. I don't think it was necessarily the most exciting game that happened this week, but it was definitely really important because it did determine who was going to take first place. Probably going into the qualifiers, definitely who stayed first place in the standings currently. For those who don't know, OMG did win, so they are currently placed first against EDG. EDG lost both games, but I feel like the losses were incredibly close, or it really came down to 2 fights, and we saw a little bit of a different EDG. So I want to lead you guys into that. Just your initial, how you felt about the game, what you think happened for EDG there.
Well, I just think OMG played overall very cleanly. I mean, EDG may look like very close to OMG in terms of standings, but a lot of what matters in those standings is how they got those standing points and whatnot, OMG still hasn't dropped a 0-2 for a reason, or hasn't gotten a 0-2. And OMG just overall looked a lot cleaner. I mean, it's pretty much when you see a very strong team against a weaker team in any region. Obviously, they're the top 2 in LPL, but I mean, EDG had a lot of advantages in the skirmishes, but like their rotations and just their general control of the map was just so much better. Like OMG just looked like closer to a Korean style of play in those games. And truth be told, like even though the gold values are relatively similar throughout most of the course of the series, it didn't really seem like EDG had a chance pretty much the whole time. I just think OMG out-rotated them, out-strategized them, and even out-picked them. So I don't know. EDG has seen better games against other teams, I'd say, than in OMG or against OMG. So maybe it's not really a decisive like determination of who's the stronger team, but yeah, I mean OMG definitely just looked a lot stronger and looked like they understood the current meta games like successfully.
Kind of to expand on that point before Kelsey jumps in here, you talked about the gold value. actually in the first game, the gold value never went over 5k, and the 5k EDG was actually leading in kills over OMG. It was completely in global objectives and just CS gold. I believe that Syndra had like 100 CS on, or Ziyang had 100 CS on you at like 20 minutes, like entirely. And to me, that does read like, well, like what you were saying, rotation based. That or OMG was finding where they needed to be and making the correct plays off of that. Do you think that this is going to continue to be a strong or a weakness for EDG? Because you're paying these players a lot of money to be the best in the region. I mean, they have a huge payroll. They're kind of like the dream team assembled. Are they performing? Would you say that since they lost the first place, that is it worth it at this point?
I don't know. I've just been less than impressed with EDG lately. I mean, and something else I want to touch on is that EDG, I mean, Name is a huge Twitch player, and he actually had his own weapon used against him, which means he should theoretically know how to play against it. And Son's Twitch actually crushed him as Lucian. And I mean, I'm no expert, but Lucian's laning should be a lot more powerful than Twitch's in most scenarios. So, and then on top of that, despite the fact that Yu has like very close to some of the most MVP points for a mid laner, he has not been impressing me either. I mean, what it comes down to is EDG's Yu seems to only really propel against weaker teams, and then when he's faced against mid laners that actually know how to apply pressure on the map, he kind of like falls short, doesn't really know what to do. He just kind of like sticks farming around and is really slow to rotate, which is the issue I see. So I don't know if Kelsey wanted to elaborate at all.
So I'm actually gonna disagree a little bit with some of these, of course. I think that so there are a few things. I think that EDG is definitely has problems early game, but I think first of all that EDG played really weird against OMG. Like they usually don't really take any objectives or anything like early game. They kind of just passively lose objectives, or they overextend without vision and then they lose kills and they fall behind in gold that way. But this time they actually tried to make a lot of plays. They picked up a lot of early dragons because they know from experience, like the last set that these two teams played together, they got crushed early by OMG. So they know that, and they got crushed late game by OMG. So the first set that they played was actually also really passive. Neither team like really made huge strong moves because this is how these teams play, right? They know that everyone in China kind of knows how to play the fast, take the dragons, take the towers games. But EDG and OMG know that they're both going to be more coordinated in the late game in team fights. They're going to have better Baron control, that kind of thing. So, but EDG also knows that OMG will be better than them in the late game, right? So they knew that they had to make earlier plays. So I think that they're capable of doing this, and they sort of showed that because they picked up like really, really, really tiny advantages, like Dragon in like the first few minutes. In the second game, like Name actually did much better against San's Twitch with Lucian. He got like a couple solo kills on him just by like running around the map and finding him, like when San would overextend. So they did some things over, like I think in the first game, San was like much better in terms of like his team, like his presence in team fight. I also think he was really strong in his presence in team fight, but in the second game, I think San was like kind of derping, especially if you remember when they were pressuring the top and then San like runs in this weird way and Name chases him through the base for first blood. That was one of my favorite moments.
I will say one thing. Sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Sorry, but my main point is that I think that like OMG and EDG are both capable of playing like stronger early games, but they just like don't put up the effort almost against weaker teams. And I think that like they have the longest average game times, right? And then the other issue is that I think Yu is much more of an assassin player, but because of the way their team is set up, they make him play like mages, and he's good at Ziggs. Like, they have a really high win rate on Ziggs. Because Ziggs, everyone's good at Ziggs, especially with the way they play, they stall out. But anyway, I've talked too much. Go ahead.
No, it's totally fine. Actually, the only thing I wanted to add in is one thing I do like is, EDG obviously has been struggling in the early game, but they've been getting sweeper trinkets out a lot faster, which is what I like. I mean, very early in the set, they got 4 sweeper trinkets out, and I do think that, even though OMG outplayed them as a team, they're on the right track. I think their weird play was more based on the fact that they're just very unfamiliar with having any kind of early advantage, and so they didn't really know how to transition that properly. It's probably like an uncomfortable spot for them since they were probably pressured to improve on their early game, and so yeah, it definitely looked really sloppy. But I really like their initiative, and I really like that they're putting a much heavier focus on vision. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add. I really like how early they're getting those sweepers out and trying to establish dragon control and stuff. Uh, yeah. With that said, I think in the new patch that EDG will be a little bit weaker, just because EU likes to play those assassin mids, and I'm not too fond of the assassin mids right now in the current live patch, just because of how prominent heal and exhaust are. But I mean, I guess we'll see.
Uh, I want to kind of segue this, still kind of on the topic of OMG or in EDG. I wanted to speak about early game because Kelsey is exactly right. EDG, I'm like so many OMGs, EDG. Edward Gaming, the new team on the block, they actually got, I think, the 3 first dragons in the first set. And essentially that game was really lost on one play around Baron, which is how like every LPL game ever is lost is on that Baron play. But the fact that they had, they're not known for making the early plays. And the fact that EDG, I felt they actually played that early game like perfectly. Like they made the correct rotations, they made the snowball, they got the early dragons. In past seasons, in past patches, a snowball gold lead like that, or even in different regions, would pretty much end any team. Like, it would just be a snowball into this huge power. But against EDG and OMG, it pretty much meant nothing. I felt like they got, like, a 2K gold lead early, and it just, like, it was non-existent. And why do you think, is it the patch that's fighting them, or is it EDG as a weakness, or is it just OMG being that much better than them? Is there that high of a skill cap between these two top teams in China? His face, he's like, I don't know.
Well, I don't think, you see, it's hard to say like worse strictly or good strictly, just because I feel like these teams prosper on different patches. But I also don't think this is the patch to blame. I think it's just the fact that people that are very experienced playing with Chinese teams at the top like are much less likely to get snowballed because of their team fighting experience and their skirmishing experience, and they find little pickoffs like that. I mean, in season 3, this is a thing because they didn't input all the like kind of anti-snowballing mechanism. So obviously, as soon as the quick rotations from pushing down a tower, then all swapping mid, and then just going base or outer towers, inner towers, like that was a lot more strong in season 3. And once that was addressed after Korea started showing that, well, you got a couple towers down, you win the game automatically. Pretty much every region was a lot better at holding off, but China especially because they are less likely to split and a lot more likely to group. That's my take.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that if you think of the relative, like before you had your two weights where your early game objective was dragon. It was worth like a lot of gold and you could snowball that way and it was impossible to come back against it. And then your late game sort of counterweight was baron. Now I feel like there's so much more weight on baron relative to like early dragons that it's easier to come back off of barons for one thing. So I think that the top LPL teams are sort of playing toward Baron. And so the top LPL teams are sort of playing toward Baron. And the lower, I guess, like the weaker, because everyone in China sort of learned how to, like, even positive energy, right? We saw positive energy this week be able to group early and, oh, we're taking this tower, we're taking this dragon, we're going, no, 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 no. They're arguably the weakest team in LPL. I mean, it doesn't seem that arguable since they've only won like 4 games, but I feel like the more patient game is something that's benefiting them, and the question is whether or not they're just doing it because they see it as an easy way to get an advantage in a situation where people don't really know how to play against that, or if like they literally don't know how to play early game as well, which I don't really think is necessarily the case. Maybe for EDG, but I don't think for OMG.
I just feel like early game is really kind of like the central point of a lot of things going down in LPL. Like you had the draw between EDG and Positive Energy. Positive Energy making huge plays early game, a huge gold lead that really EDG just couldn't come back from. And it's really curious because, again, it's like the snowball early game didn't work against OMG for EDG. Like everything went right for them early, but then it completely shuts them down. So it's like the question is the snowball early game even available anymore in the current patch, just the way that League is set up because Dragon is worth so little gold, First Blood is worth so little gold, but then to have it like snap back on them and to take a draw against arguably the worst team in LPL right now as the second best. I mean, what do you guys think happened there?
Well, what I want to say is that I don't really so much agree with the general mentality of like, oh God, you can no longer snowball and nothing but late game matters anymore. I think there's still plenty of small advantages you can take that lead up to an ultimate win, especially with how prominent Baron is, and especially in China because they're likely to fight a lot. But the thing with Positive Energy versus OMG is that Positive Energy should not have lost after they got that advantage. Like that was so massive, and I think just the fact that they almost did, despite how entertaining the games were, is a testament to how much stronger EDG is is as a team compared to PE. I mean, like it was like what 3-0, 4-0, and then like a dragon, if I recollect. And after something like that, like it shouldn't be close for at least a while. But like yeah, I don't know. EDG just crawled like right back into the game and pretty much held off, and it just came down to who could kill whose Nexus first. And I actually felt it was a little silly how EDG handled the late game anyway, because they just had FCCF on support LeBlanc, just trying to kite around the Nexus and like be flashy and like pull an Xpeke. And while it was hilarious to watch, it was just like it just seemed so like disorganized. And if anything, I don't think EDG would have lost that game if they weren't so complacent. I think they got complacent just because they were such a lower ranked team, and they don't really deem Positive Energy as a huge threat. So I don't know. I do think that snowballs definitely can lead to a decisive victory. It's just that game didn't really show it, not because of the patch or how league operates, but because Positive Energy just can't close out games. Period.
The XDG of LPL. Kelsey, you want to say something?
I think that one thing that's interesting to note is that so EDG, aside from losing to OMG, which they've now lost 4 games to OMG, right? That's their thing. They've only lost 2 games total. 1 game to LGD and 1 game to Positive Energy this week. So, but I think that another thing that's interesting to note is to Positive Energy, like I completely agree with you. They almost shouldn't have lost that game considering how many gains they made in order to come back. Like they should have lost that game because of the commanding Positive Energy lead, but they shouldn't have lost that game because like they went from like a 10k gold deficit to like a 2k gold deficit. And I've seen them do this several times. Like I've seen them go from almost 10k gold deficits to winning games over and over and over again. And I think that the second game against Positive Energy is another example against that because Positive Energy had like another really strong commanding early game. And then the 2 times that they've lost, I think it's just because the early game has been a little too commanding and because of complacency. Like I would agree with complacency as being a factor. Like against LGD, this was the first game that LGD had played after they got 2-0'd by Energy Pacemaker, which was their first set in the entire LPL. And Energy Pacemaker, for those of you who don't know, was like the awful team last split. They won 2 games, I think, total. Like it was
3.
terrible.
But yeah,
Thank God he was not here.
was it
Shots
I
fired.
was pretty sure it was 2 because I remember when they 2-0'd LGD, my thought was, oh, okay, they've already equaled their record from last split. Um, but yeah, so everyone was thinking that LGD was like not that good. But then they went, and then the very next game they won against EDG, who everyone was saying was like the new super team or whatever. And I think it's because like EDG that game played like Twitch LeBlanc to this extremely aggressive early, and Quan got his Lee Sin, and at that time people didn't know about Quan's Lee Sin. Like you have to ban it because he can't play anything else, but he can play a really good Lee Sin. So they got ganked like over and over and over again. And they were just really complacent about that. And so LGD snowballed out of control, and they found like their first win to what ended up being the second place team of LPL. And then I think also Name had like another weird pick that he hasn't played in the split before. Like I think he's played it before. He's played Draven before, but not really in the split. So it was something maybe he hadn't practiced a lot lately.
Well, and it's like, why take Draven into the Chinese chicken? Like normally you would see a strong laner. Like Drexen, you mentioned earlier that Lucian does better in lane against Twitch, but I think the issue that you forgot is that Twitch and Lucian never laned against each other because everyone's
You're
like they're rushing down those towers. So it's like it doesn't even. So why would Name even look at Draven? Because he's not going to have the 2v2. He's not going to run a kill lane, and Draven excels in skirmishes, which the Chinese meta is all about, grouping team fights as opposed to the small 3v3s over objectives.
First of all, I stand corrected. It was only 2 wins. Secondly, I just think it was a horrible pick. I don't think there's any kind of justification they had outside of wanting to try it against a team that they felt was much weaker than them, and so they felt it was a good like live demonstration of what they could do with Draven. I don't think if it was against a team like OMG or World Elite or something, they would just say, "Oh, hey, let's pick up Draven. This is good for the situation." I think it was more of an experimental thing that they wanted to try out against Positive Energy because yeah, Draven's turret siege is not really spectacular. So I don't really see a merit in it that besides like assuming they were going to snowball. And yeah, I think they were playing chicken and picks and bans too, kind of in that game, to be honest with you. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Draven was purely experimental based on the fact that they figured they were facing off against the first or second worst team in China.
And I think, though it is funny because we mentioned that Draven is really bad at sieging, and he almost like took their Nexus at like 4 minutes, which is. But I think in
I think
general,
that team they were facing versus the
yeah,
actual
that
pick.
was
Yeah.
that was definitely. But it's still funny to think about that. But
Yeah, I
again,
mean,
like I think it's just not necessarily that. Um, I guess it's more reflective of how complacent they were, I guess, than anything than a commentary on Draven or anything like that. It's just that oh, okay, this is a champion we haven't played all split. Brand new patch. It probably isn't good on this patch, as good on this patch in terms of sieging. Let's just play it against Positive Energy because we can, and that was my feeling when they lost to LGD as well. So
yeah, I mean, Draven's a champion to pick if you want to fight a lot. His steroid's not very spectacular in a tower because you can't reset his W, and his wave clear isn't really stellar when you have so many other wave clear champions to pick from the bottom lane, like Lucian, Twitch, uh, like pretty much anyone else that's highly mobile that's not Draven. They all have fantastic wave clear in comparison. So I don't know. Yeah, I think they either wanted to fight a lot or they were complacent. That's just the bottom line.
While we're on kind of the topic of picks, I know that Kelsey, you did want to talk a little bit about Orianna, but I want to talk about mid lane kind of because again, it's always going back to the Chinese chicken just because it's so like prominent right now in LPL. Mid lane is essentially turned into a true 1v1, whereas before junglers, of course, are going to be a huge central part of any mid lane matchup. It is almost like a 2v2 in its own respective right. But now we're seeing obviously Syndra is pretty popular in China versus any other region. We saw, what was it, Yang and Yu, I think it was Ori versus Syndra. And that was like the first time that I've really seen like a Syndra really get to bully an Orianna because she got to be that bruiser pick. And we saw him, I think he picked Ziggs the next round, which whatever, it's Ziggs, he's perfect everywhere. But we also saw LeBlanc, and I think that's opening up more assassins to be played in the meta because they don't have to worry about that 2v2. It's literally just that 1v1, how am I going to directly counter this guy? I mean, do you think more teams are going to start to shift there? Do you think EDG was at a disadvantage in there because they didn't take the true 1v1 counter and you just got crushed that way because he was essentially a utility mage?
I don't feel like I know enough about the Syndra versus Orianna matchup to comment on this. But I don't know if it was so much that. I think it was. I don't think it was a 1v1 thing. It was just the execution overall and team play. So I don't really have too much to add.
Chelsea?
I think that face-off in particular was 1v1, and I think we do see more 1v1s mid like than any other lane almost in China, just because there's less jungle presence than either top or bottom, which I think Hugo made that comment last week, which is pretty accurate, I feel. And so there are more 1v1s mid than maybe anywhere else, but they do roam quite a bit more, and I do think that that particular matchup between Ziyang and Yu was kind of a. I was surprised by how like I actually wasn't that surprised because I've heard that Ziyang is like the best Syndra in solo queue in China or something like that. I've heard this from.
He definitely showed it. If you watch that
Um,
1v1, he pretty much, I won't say he dumpstered you, but he pretty much kicked you in and was just decimating him. You got a roam up, but obviously like Syndra can't roam as well as Orianna, but it didn't even matter because everyone's up top doing their thing with the inhib towers, and he just gets to do his thing.
But
Yeah.
like, the thing is I don't necessarily think that there will be more assassin picks just because on 4.5, like obviously we haven't been on 4.5 in China yet, but I don't think there will be more assassin picks just because of what Drexen said earlier about the heals and everything being
And
like so
exhaust.
much, and exhaust, yeah, especially being really hard to pick up. I think that China is kind of in a good place for that because even though we do have like good assassin players like you, and I also think Ziyang is actually in a similar camp where he's better at like the assassins, single out a single target, that kind of style of gameplay. But they both have been practicing a lot of utility mages. Like we don't see as many, I call them divas in China, that who like insist on limiting themselves to their favorite champions. Like you get like Wicked and Soaz like complaining about the new meta in the top lane, and we don't want to play in Zion Spartan. We don't want to play these champions, but I feel like no one in China does that. It's like, okay, this is good right now. I should learn it for my team. Except
Yeah.
maybe PDD, but PDD is PDD.
Yeah.
Those Renekton ults.
Jiang is definitely MVP for a reason. Also, another thing about assassins in 4.5 that a lot of people don't address is just the fact that scaling runes are so much better. I mean, even without the summoner changes, which are a huge deal, you just have so much more innate defense without building anything, and like that can make the difference between life or death later on. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we do see a lot of assassin mids in China. I think it's a lot more balanced than people give it credit for, and I think most people can play either way. So I don't think it's going to be too big of an influence on the picks for mid lane.
The other mid pick that I kind of wanted to cover with you guys is Ziggs, because I feel like EDG in particular has like an over reliance on Ziggs. Obviously, his strength comes out because he's able to pretty much stall a game out entirely by himself. Teams losing doesn't matter, you got Ziggs, he can wave clear for days. Teams winning doesn't matter, you got Ziggs, so he's gonna dumpster people from across the map. Can you guys speak a little bit about Ziggs as far as the Chinese meta?
I hate Ziggs.
I see you shaking your head like, no, I don't want to talk about
It's
this.
just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Ziggs is obviously good at like everything, right? And he's just a ridiculous champion. In the Chinese meta, like just the zoning potential he has alone is like huge for their team fights. But I mean, also just wave clear is just everything about that champion is just kind of stupid. uh, I mean, obviously, if they're going to group up a lot, it's very advantageous to have a Ziggs because then you can instantly wave clear another lane pretty much at any given point. So that's a huge plus. Regardless of how the meta turns out, I mean, pretty much all regions, including China, are going to be using Ziggs if it warrants it. It's especially good actually as like peel if you're fighting in like narrow corridors in the jungle. So if you end up like picking a team fight composition, which they usually do, or planning on team fighting or invading a lot, it's really good for that because you can just lay some mines in front of your AD carry and just stand behind them and do damage that way. So.
See, he found where I was trying to lead him. I was trying to lead you with that question. Because I do think that China actually uses Ziggs in a very different way than any other region because they are so AD carry focused. You have to think like every other region in the world right now, the number one matchup is going to be Ziggs, Lulu. We don't actually see a ton of Lulu in LPL. I mean, she shows up, but we see a lot of Orianna, we see a lot of Syndra, we see a lot of Ziggs.
Zhang destroyed on Lulu this week, but yeah, I agree it's not as common as a pick.
And I think the reason being is because Syndra, Orianna, and Ziggs and what they do for the AD carry, the fact of like how the Chinese think. Kelsey, you had that interview with, I'm completely spacing the team now, but they spoke about how because the support's so much stronger, it leads to the AD carry being stronger. Like, and they're the only region who would even think that. Maybe you can rephrase that.
Yeah, it was OMG's coach who told me about this like mentality that because not only do their support and jungler have more options for killing us, but now our support and jungler have more options for protecting our AD carry. So it actually can be better for the AD carry. Um, so that was an interesting. I think on the Ziggs though, if like to talk about how fundamental Ziggs is for EDG, first of all, like they have a 5-to-1 win rate with Ziggs, which is like their highest win rate, alongside also Morgana and Kha'Zix. So like and it makes perfect sense when you think about how their team works together because like Clear Love loves to come in and like take like FCZF is always gonna start the fights, right? He's get perfect single target grabs on like the perfect squishy target. Like this is what he does pretty much every time. And then so Clearlove always jumps in and then grabs them. So like Kha'Zix is the perfect champion for him. And then Morgana also has the black shield to protect Name, who is like the star, right? And then you have Ziggs, where an EGG falls behind, he can just stall forever and also like completely turn fights with awesome Mega Inferno bombs. So it makes sense that those three champions would be their best win rate champions. I also think that Ziggs works perfectly, as you mentioned, with like the mines and the narrow corridors. I feel like I see so many Chinese fights where they're just able to lead the team like one by one through that little tiny narrow area that's like, that walkway that's between Dragon and the blue jungle or whatever
Hmm.
on the right side. I feel like why do these Chinese teams keep falling for that against like OMG over and over again? Like I swear like EP versus OMG was this week, right? And then and I think Son was playing Twitch again, and they just fed them through this narrow corridor, and he sprayed and played and like killed them. It's just like,
Yeah.
why do you keep doing that?
EP
Why?
was like the
Stop.
kill vending machine.
Stop.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah.
Also, to expand on the mindset of like the carries being so important in China, is a lot of the way they see it isn't so much like this works well with this as far as picks go. Like it's more like instead of these being my teammates, these are things that I can utilize to bolster my AD carry. Like that's how they think of everything. So it's like they think of it less individually and more like, yeah, this is a tool for my carry. Like Ziggs bombs are a tool for my carry. Like this disengage is a tool that my carry can use. So yeah, it's kind of interesting and funny how they're still kind of stuck in that kind of sense.
So as we've beaten OMG and ED down, transitioning to now Invictus Gaming. I like watching Invictus Gaming. I feel like they're the counter logic gaming of LPL. Like they're literally the best and the worst team in LPL at the exact same time. Always really fun to watch. They did pick up their second 2-0, which pretty impressive. It was against PE though, but that's a team they've struggled against in the past. So I mean, has Invictus Gaming, have they? Everyone likes to talk about slumps and streaks. Has Invictus Gaming finally kind of found and collected themselves to move forward? And then also I wanted to talk about PDD's Renekton ults because oh my goodness, I feel like that guy is so inconsistent. Like he's either completely on point or he just completely misses it. I feel like he dominances like it's a global area of effect. I don't even understand.
Well, I think it's too early to gauge if their slump is over because it seems very likely for IG to go like 4-0 and then just cry and just die over and over in the future games. But I mean, they definitely looked strong against Positive Energy. I wouldn't say the sets were completely convincing, but they definitely looked pretty good. And I actually liked Kid on Ezreal. I thought that was a pretty good pick for them, and I hope he plays it a little bit more because it seems a lot more comfortable for him than some of his other champs he's been playing recently. Uh, Also, yeah, they used Ziggs in the first game against Positive Energy, so they could pretty much stall infinitely, even though Positive Energy had like a poke comp. So, I don't know. I think Invictus Gaming could be really good. Like you said, they could be the best team and the worst team at the same time. It's really hard to gauge just from 2 weeks, like where they stand at the moment. So I can't really say decisively if they've ended their slump. I will say they've cleaned up a little bit, and I also do like that they're a lot more open and successful with experimentation than a lot of teams. Because I know that, well, let's go back to what like the general audience can relate to, right? So I am World Championships, like Invictus Gaming, they did okay in their lanes. Like, well, I actually okay is an understatement. ZZTie like did really well against Expeke, but on the other hand, you saw like World Elite and their mid laner Suckham, he kind of like tried to play like 80 mids, and he's shown that he can't like play anything except for AP mids. So yeah, that didn't work out for him. I just like how Invictus Gaming can like kind of like change their style all the time. Well, not their style, but their picks. I like how they're very flexible with what they can do and show success with it. So I don't know. Maybe they can just like shake it up so that people can't like decisively study one like absolute tactic to work against them. And maybe like that's their strong point if they just keep switching it up every week. But also another thing that will help them is just if like PDD like plays one way all the time and doesn't just like randomly suck and like randomly do good. I think that'll help the team a lot.
I just feel like he comes around a corner and he just like pops Dominus just to, like pop it. It's bizarre. I was like, what are you doing? You're not even in a team fight right now.
It's a psychological factor.
It's
I mean,
if he's
you
not
gotta
gonna pop
terrify your opponents.
exactly. If he's not gonna pop ult for the minions, when will he pop ult? Where do you draw that line?
Well, let's be fair. His ults were better than Wicked's flashes this weekend. But,
Oh wow, shots fired. Kelsey, do you have anything to add to Invictus? I know we beat them down, but I just think that they're such a fun team to watch. Just because, like Drexen was saying, they are very versatile. They have more experimental picks. They do crazy stuff, like just bizarrely so.
Yeah. So Really quick, we can decide if we want to add Hubo for the last 20 minutes since he just got online. Um, but to finish the Invictus Gaming comment before that, I think that yeah, you're absolutely right about the fact that their strength is that they can like play new things all the time. And I think ZZ Tai is a big component of that because he can just pick stuff up and he just like looks at it because he's ZZ Tai and he's just like, oh, look, I can play this. This is cool. Look, I'm Yasuo and I'm 1v5ing this guy who's supposed to be like a really good mid laner, right? Expeke, maybe you've heard of him. But then
He's like a champion now or something.
yeah, so he does that and but I feel like once people learn how to play these champions, he's like only slightly good at them. So that's like something that Invictus Gaming needs to do is that they need to keep innovating to stay ahead because I feel like without that kind of thing, they're only going to be okay.
But at that point, are they just waiting for the patch to make them strong? We talk about LDG being kind of like a patch team almost, like the big Riven pick was big, and then Riven kind of got nerfed, and they kind of fell off a little bit. But, I mean, is IG going to hit a stride where eventually their crazy strategies are going to work? I mean, we had a Xerath-Varus combo from them at one point. That was pretty crazy.
I don't feel like they're much of a patch team. I think they just have to keep doing things that people aren't expecting within the patch, to be honest. Like Kelsey said, basically continue rotating mid lane champions so that they're not really ever comfortable and expecting anything because, while IG is certainly not predictable with their picks, like it seems like when they do kind of stop deviating from their usual, they kind of go with a definition of insanity where things don't work and they keep using it. But since they've deviated from that the last 2 weeks, it's obviously shown that it's merited them quite a bit, so...
Since it seems like we've kind of killed IAG, which we kind of killed them last week, I did.
Oh, I love them. They're a fun team to watch. But I mean, the facts are the facts.
Do we want to add Hubo for the last 20 minutes, or are we just gonna?
I'd have to completely redo the Skype calls because everything will get switched. But if he wants to, like, if the audience doesn't mind, while I quickly reevaluate everything, does Hubo have a lot to say about Royal because that's what we're going to talk about. So we dance around. Yeah, I was going to talk about Royal. I feel like Royal is really accessible to the Western world just because obviously Uzi, everyone knows who Uzi is. I feel like the Western world doesn't realize how far Royal has fallen. Oh, I guess we're adding Hubo now. So I'm going to kick you guys off. Opening the floor to Royal. We haven't really talked about them a lot. I feel that Uzi did perform really well. He recently got moved to AD carry position. So while I figure this guys out, why don't you guys cover kind of the history of Royal to catch people up and then talk about their performance this coming week.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, Royal Club is a run by a very rich organization in China. Even though you've seen them as the Season 3 runner-ups for World Champions, they haven't actually always been like that. So, despite the fact that we're seeing them fall, there's also the possibility that they weren't the strongest team going into Worlds as is. The match they got into the World Championships was against World Elite, which many people thought were a better team at the time. I actually discussed this on last week's episode if you want to check that out. A lot more in depth. But yeah, Royal Club obviously doesn't have Tabe anymore, which is what most people can relate to. And recently, Uzi has switched to the mid lane. Well, let's back up. Uzi was in the mid lane because essentially he didn't really trust any alternative supports. But, he transitioned back into AD carry and he's been doing really well for his team. And actually, his jungler has been doing quite well too. So will Royal Club see a resurgence? I'm not really sure, but they definitely aren't the strong Worlds team that you saw before. In fact, they're pretty consistently bottom 3 at the moment in LPL. Shigbo in the call or question mark?
He's it shows that it's calling him, but it says that there's a problem with his end connection. I did want to talk about, though, because I'm glad that you mentioned that Royal, it was kind of a surprise. It was an upset that they even made it to Worlds over World Elite, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize that. And it also went back to the caster desk, actually. Kelsey, you were talking the other day how a lot of the speculation of the caster desk actually being scripted because Monty was the only one who was going for SK, and then to have like a 3-0 upset over that, and a lot of people were supporting Royal despite the fact that Royal even being there was a complete surprise. Like, people didn't expect Royal Club to get there. No, no one has
I
comment.
yeah, I think this was something that they talked about on the Summoning Insight show with Monte Cristo and Thorin, which was that someone actually came out with this publication that was like a more mainstream publication, not devoted to esports, that was commenting on the event, and they talked about because of the way that they saw the event and the casters, the analyst desk was talking about how like everyone except Monte Cristo predicted that Royal would win. So the way this media source interpreted it was that this upstart Korean team came and like overthrew Royal Club, which in fact it was like the opposite case is that it was really surprising that Royal was even in the finals. Um, yes. So someone in the chat says that Monty just said he was being fine being a villain and people were yeah, that's pretty much what happened, but like because of that, that was sort of some of the Royal got a little bit overhyped as a bigger team than they actually were. That said, though, the question is like I think Hubo. I'm glad Hubo's coming back because I talked to him a little bit
Oh my
um,
goodness.
about Uzi and whether or not like does he look as good as he did last season in this weekend's games. I think like we can't like he's looked progressively better each weekend that I've seen him, but I'd really no. I don't think Royal Club would have won against LGD with Uzi in the mid lane, even in LGD's current form. Like I'm gonna make that statement, but we'll see.
Uh, Michael, Rosker, and Kelsey, how are all of you?
Hey man, how you doing?
uh,
Good
oh
morning.
my God, yeah, no, I'm so sorry. I'm like, cause I honestly had like I went to sleep early, but I got woken up last night because I had things to take care of. So waking up this morning was just Ugh. Okay, so if we're talking about Royal, though, just to get into the thick of things, if we're talking about Royal, I'm glad Kelsey did mention that we did have a very small conversation about this because when I like looked at Uzi, I thought he got not she talking about him getting progressively better. I thought he was getting exponentially better, and I didn't really think that his support was giving him that much help either. I really thought that, in lane Uzi looked, he looked okay. I mean, he did a couple things well. Didn't necessarily impress me that much over Styes, even though I did believe Uzi did win lane in game 2 at least. But we're talking about the Royal versus LGD game, right? So,
Yep.
but during team fights and positioning, I don't know if Uzi's shot calling if at all, but then always seemed to be he always seemed to be at the right place at the right time. I mean, Uzi, as an AD carry, he really impressed me. I was like really happy to see him back in form, and I honestly think, and I don't say this about a lot of people, but I honestly think that Uzi can, reach like top 5 AD carrying the world status pretty quickly. At least by the very end of this LPL split.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
bold
mean,
words.
yeah, no, well, I mean, I agree. I don't know if I'd say exponential growth, but if you compare it from the very first game he got back to 80 carry, which was like, oh god, this guy's lost his form completely, to now, like, yeah, it definitely does seem exponential, but not so much because like he was like good and then great, but because he was like awful and then good. But yeah, I mean, he's been pretty impressive lately, I'll definitely admit. And I think the thing with his support helping, yeah, I mean, maybe he's not the most like spectacular support, but at the same time, it could also be a double-edged sword. I mean, Uzi initially wasn't willing to work with another support after Zabe retired, so it could be like a double-edged sword thing going on. But yeah, Uzi definitely seems like he knows what he's doing late game now, and it's been pretty impressive. He has gotten a lot of help from his jungler, which I think is
Yeah, that's true.
definitely never getting enough credit ever on a Royal Club, and probably one of the only other people on the team that like deserve to be in the LPL. But like, I don't know, maybe that's kind of like brutal to say, but
The,
that's kind of how I feel about it. But yeah, I mean, Uzi's really good. He's proven that he has the talent before. It was just a matter of time before he came back into shape.
the famous Jarvan 4 of the League of
Yep.
Legends Pro League. Oh God. Yeah, no, but what's his name? What's the jungler's name again?
KMI.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kami. I mean, Kami has. I actually thought there were there were a whole bunch of stories that about like Uzi flaming KMI on like in game and about KMI like playing badly and everyone telling him that he should. I actually thought that KMI kind of he did slightly warrant the hate at least earlier in the season, but I have seen improvements, so I've been happy to see that as well. I mean, Royal as a team just got you know 1 or 2 weeks after Uzi's switch from the mid lane, Royal as a team just got, much better. Like, I'm not even talking about like the individual mechanics, because the individual mechanics for the LPL, the individual mechanics were never like a huge problem for me, but just some of the really small decision making, like the macro decision making, but some of the really small decisions that each player makes, from during each game has really been you know, good. And I think KMI's jungle pathing is actually pretty good too. So I'm happy to see that.
I
Always
think
picking on the junglers. I'll go, Kelsey.
Yeah.
sorry. I think that I wouldn't say that they've improved as a team. I just think that like Uzi is a much better AD carry than Lei. Like that's just Lei was probably the worst player in LPL. Like I'm
God,
glad that guy's gone. It was
yeah.
bad.
It was
Um,
almost it was almost as depressing as the positive energy change. I mean, you go from Nami to their new AD carry, and then Uzi from their new AD carry, and like the stark differences was like amazing to see. Just like how much worse the teams were with their new setup. But yeah, I'll let you continue. Sorry, I just wanted to
and,
chime in like how different those teams looked when they did the initial changes.
and they'll
I
put
mean, yeah, and sorry, I'll cut in here. Like,
Poor Kelsey.
sorry,
Good
Kelsey.
morning. How are you?
Morning. I am so disoriented right now. But I mean, I agree with Michael though. Like, Royals AD carry was absolute shit. Like, he was so bad. It was amazing how bad he was for the LPL. Like, it was incredible. Like this, I was thinking to myself like every game, like this good dude must be like the Zuna of straight LPL. Like straight like platinum league LP, like China, like in the Chinese server, like a platinum league AD carry. I thought he was so bad, but yeah, go on, Kelsey.
Wow, shots
uh,
fired. Taking down Zuna with him. Gets up, and he's just like, he gets up and just punches Zuna in the face. And then he sits down. He's like, okay, I'm ready. Go,
I gotta
Kelsey.
do what I gotta do.
so yeah, it was. I think that was a huge thing. And then NCT, like they moved him from top to mid, and I don't feel like he's a better mid laner than he is a top laner. He's just like less likely to feed because the jungler doesn't gank mid as much as it ganks top. And then like Yao can just be okay. Like Yao, the new top laner, can just be okay. So I don't think the team is necessarily better. It's just that they found a way to minimize the damage done by
Yeah,
their
but
own team members,
my
which is
opinion.
another terrible thing to say. And I do think that like when LGD got Riven, they made that like really apparent because they had the Riven Oriana combo and that was really on point. Like
Oh
I thought
yeah.
that game they were really on point that game and they made like the flaws and the cracks of Royal Club. Oh, they're still here. It was very obvious. And the second game was pretty much just Uzi hard carrying. So that's kind of my feeling on the situation.
I want to kind of bring up, chat is talking about best AD carry in the world, which Reddit thinks that it's Piglet. We're not.
Oh,
We'll let him go. But they're also talking about Uzi's support. And I was talking previously with Kelsey about Conan, my favorite support for World Elite's Wei Zhao. I think Conan is a straight
okay.
Neanderthal. I'm not quite sure. Like, I feel like this is always the instance of, in Korea, you have supports like Mad Life, which everyone's like, oh my gosh, Mad Life's so good. His AD carry just can't keep up with him. But I feel like in China, it's almost the complete reverse. You have these amazing AD carries. We have Name, we have Wei Xiao, we have Uzi. Name, best AD carry in the world. I'm going to make that statement. You guys can refute. And you have these supports that just cannot keep up with them. Conan in particular. I don't know if you guys have any other names that you want to put on that bullet list.
About supports that can keep up with their AD carries. I think like it's really tough to say because I honestly don't know like who does the shot calling for Name, because if Name does the shot calling for Name, then he's a horrible AD carry. Like what the hell? But then if I mean if no one if they're not communicating in lane well enough, or if it's FCZF who's doing the shot calling, then I mean the problem lies in FCZF. I keep saying every single game I see Name, make so many aggressive plays in lane and out, both inside and outside of the lane, that it doesn't merit the aggressiveness with which he does play. Like considering the fact that he has no ward coverage or no vision or no knowledge of where the enemy junglers are or no knowledge of where the enemy players are. So, I mean, you'll see like when I talk about I think for some, and I know Kelsey and Michael might disagree with me, but when I talk about Name, right? I always talk about like heartbreak because like I'm so like heartbroken because when I see this guy play, right, especially in team fights, his positioning is so immaculate. Literally, I mean, I fail to see any errors when this guy team fights, but in lane, and sometimes he makes really just dumb aggressive decisions outside of lane as well. Like usually when he's alone and split away from his team, it's just like I know he can be so much better, but there are just times when he just gets caught out, times when he loses duels. Like, it's not pretty to watch.
See, for me, I actually feel like Uzi's the stronger team fight AD carry. Name's the better skirmish / dual AD carry, but that's my
Yeah.
take on it.
Yeah, I mean, well, no. So, I mean, you see, like, I actually think, well, Name does get cut out a lot, right? But at the same time, like, his mechanics are good enough to avoid certain problems that would afflict, the
Yeah.
the AD carry of the old AD carry of Royal Club. I mean, so I mean, yeah, Name's that good, but at the same time, like, you wish he wouldn't put himself in some of the positions that he does get into, like. If you're the best AD carry in the world, you shouldn't be giving up so many deaths in lane. And I'm not talking. It's not a substantial amount by any means, but still, like when there are other AD carries out there, especially in Korea, that I think are just getting progressively better and better and better, then really, I wish I like to tell my friends like drinking a beer or something like that. Yeah, dude, I write for the LPL and China has the best AD carries in the world, so all of you, right? But then sometimes it's hard for me to do that just because the game sense is a little lacking.
So I'm talking about a little bit about Nami in particular. Like it's all relative because until like this week, I think he had the third highest KDA in China. So if you talk about he gives up so many deaths in lane, but like how many deaths are we talking if he still has the third highest KDA in China? I also think that in terms of ward coverage, like Mike and I talked about this in the show a little bit earlier, that their ward coverage, I think in particular late game, like and in early game, I think it's less important now that we've moved to like the teams on opposite sides of the map doing the things, and there's no actual laning, whatever. Is less important, but their late game warding, like I don't think any other Chinese team right now buys as many pink wards as EDG.
Yeah, that
Like
is true.
they're really
Or
good at
have as many trinkets.
or
Super
sweepers,
trinkets.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So they're getting much better, especially at late game vision. So yeah, there's that going for them.
I did kind of want to bring up because the chat was as we were bouncing around best 80 carry. The chat brought up IAM, particularly the matchup between Kid and Score, and I wouldn't say that Kid is I mean he's a good 80 carry, but he's not necessarily the best in LPL. I will arguably say that Kid pretty much outclassed Score in every single way. And not to say that Score is the best 80 carry in Korea, but he is definitely a higher contender than I think IG ranks coming from Korea.
Right. I mean, the thing is, though, that Score fits when the KT Bullets run any specific game plan, right? Score runs the champions and plays with a flair and a style that fits, the KTB style or strategy very, very well. And there are times when, even though I I will agree with you, Fro, that Kid is by far the better AD carry. Not by far, but he is a better AD carry. And I don't. It's hard. It would be hard for anyone to come out outright and say, no, Kid is an inferior AD carry to Score. There are times when I think Score does more, so to speak, because of the way AD carry is played in Korea, and B, because the way Score fits into his teams. I mean, into most of his team's compositions. I actually. It also depends, what kind of edition we're talking about Score, because I think, the 2014 Score post, IEM era Score has been less impressive than the 2013 Score. So, it goes to that too. I mean, while we're on the topic of Korean AD carries, just to throw like the big ones out there, right? If we wanted to talk about, comparing Korean AD carries and comparing Chinese AD carries, then, I'm sorry to take the matter out of your hands, Fro, but then we would probably be talking about Piglet, Imp, Deft, Prey, maybe Paragon. Zepha's pretty good too. So we'd probably be talking about those kind of people again versus Styes.
The shake of the head,
Sorry,
the styes.
yes,
no, let's
yes.
not talk about
He's not
styes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Jeez.
Styles, Wei Zhao. I think Wei Zhao has done really well for himself, particularly in the past 1 or 2 weeks. So Wei Zhao, Kid, Name, and Sun. I guess Sun. I think Sun has proven himself to be a top 80 carry now in China.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's very interesting is that those two teams team fight slightly differently. And I say that in the way that, like, when I think about like Korean versus Chinese team fighting, and this might be a weird analogy to use, but when I think about Korean versus Chinese team fighting, I think when I think about Korean team fighting, I think about like a huge like gargantuan battle, like all these generals like lined up in the battlefield, and everyone's like, like Lord of the Rings style, like you shall not pass, like straight up, like everyone like clashing each other on this huge open field, right? When I think about Chinese team fighting, I think about like, it's like freaking like all these thugs in like a dark alley, like pulling out knives and shit and like that, and like trying to like stab each other and go at each other and things. So like and that's just because I think the way vision works and the way Chinese and Koreans, prioritize different things and the way they're in the alleys in which they meet. So I don't really know. I do think Chinese AD carries on a general level are better than Korean AD carries, but I will make an argument that ADs like Imp and Deft are playing just as well as Name and Sun are this year. So I would be hesitant to point to China as I'll be hesitant to say that Name is the best AD carry in the world and ride that bandwagon as much as I would like to.
As
Um. Oh,
Go ahead, Jackson.
okay. No, I just wanted to say that. I mean, again, rating 80 carry, and then we actually had this in a Skype conversation earlier. But rating 80 carries is like very speculative, and it's based on a lot of different things because what one team wants from their 80 carry can be entirely different from what another team wants from their 80 carry. To bring an NA example, just look at like what Sneaky did in last year's summer split. He wasn't like hard carrying or playing the champions he did now, but he played a very utility based like Ash carry, or pretty much. And yeah, maybe he wasn't as flashy as Doublelift, but he still did exactly what his team needed to do. And a lot of the times that's how it is for Korea. Uh, like KTB obviously plays a little bit differently than most teams in China. Yeah, score kind of plays for his team, and that's not how China views their 80 carries. Like I said earlier in the show, I mean a lot of the teammates for an 80 carry are more viewed as tools and assets for the 80 carry to succeed. So I mean it's just a different viewpoint, and trying to compare Chinese 80 carries to Korean 80 carries just like that is kind of difficult. There's just like too much to speculate on, and just the objectives for both are just so different that you can't really directly compare them, especially with IM World Championships being the only like recent international showing between both of them, and the fact that while Score is good, he's probably not a top 380 carry in China, and Kid is certainly not a top 380 carry in China. So, well, no, he's not.
Yeah, he's
But
not.
but yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, but obviously the teams want different things from their carries, and that's pretty much what it comes down to, and why it's hard to say like outside of just strictly KDA statistics. I mean, that's one way to say you're good because you're staying alive and killing people, which is essentially your job. But pretty much any other thing, it's just I don't know. It's very speculative.
Uh,
I mean, oh, sorry, Kelsey, go ahead.
No, you decided it was me. I just wanted to make the quick segue since we were talking about the international scene to kind of move to qualifiers and then farther down the world. I'm going to ask you guys at the end of every single LPL, like, who you predict for Worlds. See if it changes, which obviously it's probably not going to change this time, just because things kind of secured the same. Go, Hubo.
If we are talking about that, I want to say Kelsey, and you did a very nice job on the power rankings this week. I am very I was very happy with the power rankings. I think they were excellent. So props to you. Props to you and the rest of the crew. Usually usually like in I mean, it's not going to be any different this week, but usually like the Lolly Sports crew does get like a lot of shit about the power rankings, and I'm usually part of that like, yeah, Lolly Sports suck, like Viva la Revolucion, that kind of crew. But like this week I essentially had nothing to say. So if we're gonna get into qualifiers, I mean, it's at this point. I think talking about Worlds is basically talking like, you know, OMG versus like how does OMG as a team stack up against the best of the world? And I would argue that they stack up very, very well because I think, I mean, Well, and I'll open the floor because I kind of want to listen to what Michael and Kelsey have to say before I comment on what anything OMG does. But I think OMG is basically the shining standard of what Chinese play, the level of Chinese play that the standard has to rise to in order for Chinese teams to actually compete in on the world level. Not that they can't already. So I open the floor.
I think you just stole my job.
Yeah, sometimes I gotta do what I gotta do. I've only been on for 20 minutes. I gotta make up for all that time. My fans want me. So
Well, standings don't lie. I mean, if only two people can go, I'm still gonna say OMG and EDG. OMG far more than EDG because they can play multiple styles, as I said last week, and they don't seem to be faltering anytime soon. They still haven't even dropped a 0-2 in China.
yeah,
So,
they.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to compare how they would do to Korea, but as far as who makes worlds from China, that's very clear in my opinion. And yeah, OMG, EDG, and Energy Pacemaker is definitely not going to make it. So hold your
I mean,
cheers, my friend.
Shots fired.
Oh, my
I think
dreams.
I still think Amazing J will transfer teams, and Amazing J will carry a team towards the World Championship. So I still have hope. But here's here's what I think, and we're gonna start firing a little bit more shots, right? Then here's what I do think. I think that OMG as a team will, and actually Chinese teams in general will more than expected, more than what's expected of them, crap on a lot of Korean teams when the time comes. Like I think that OMG will absolutely punish SK Telecom T1 come All Stars time, and here's why. Because when we talk about two teams playing against each other, right? I like to talk about certain matchups and the way each team plays the game. For example, when I was talking to, we all know Nilu Kulasingham. If you guys don't know him, Duraven, he's an editor-in-chief of Mooniverse.com. Big shout-outs. But when he and I were talking about the Cloud9 versus World Elite game that was coming up for IEM, I told Nilu that Cloud9 wasn't necessarily a better team than World Elite. However, their style, in the style that Cloud C9 has transitioned to, which predicates really early jungler aggression and just strong lanes and sometimes even 2v1s, really matches up against what Wei Zhao and crew used to like to do, at least before. Like World Elite like to extend their lanes. They like to have a relative keep even in lane. They wouldn't they wouldn't really go around be rotating until the 15-minute mark or something like that. So I mean, and I think that's why C9 beat World Elite so handily, even though World Elite would beat some teams that C9 would lose to. But when we talk about OMG, right, there are a few things. When we talk about the Chinese scene in general, actually, a few things include a lot of lane fighting, a lot of early ganks and lane fighting, particularly for OMG, and a lot of jungler aggression. I mean, there will be so many fights in the avenues of the jungle that I just can't count anymore. And Korean teams have been prone. They've shown themselves to be vulnerable to enemies that show early jungle aggression. The reason why I believe the reason why SK Telecom T1K got shut down so hard in so many um, in so many games this season is because teams realize that when you shut down Bengi on SKT, you basically take over the game. And when you shut down, when you go into his jungle, start taking his camps, start messing with him, start mind gaming him, that's when SKT really falters. And additionally, the mid lanes and the mid lane and the bottom lane of OMG is really strong, so they won't necessarily have to be Clearlove won't necessarily have to be worried about his lanes necessarily just completely full out losing to the lanes of SK Telecom T1. So when I look at a team like OMG going up against a lot of Korean teams, I sense very nice things for the fans of the LPL. I am very pleased that this matchup is coming up, especially since as part of the LPL crew, you kind of do want LPL teams to win, right? To prove themselves, and maybe Tencent in their billions of bucks will finally get English coverage for the LPL if they see that the scene is popular enough. But I'm very excited for OMG style to come, and eventually, I think they're gonna shit on SKT. So there's my take.
These are bold moves. I do want to kind of interject before we move on to Drexen and Kelsey's opinions on this. When Bingy met Loveland, I believe that they really kind of took from the Chinese meta as far as the jungle went of invading the enemy jungler, and that mentality of if I go in and I find the enemy jungler and I kill him, then I don't have to worry about his ganks because obviously I can gank whatever I want, and I know if he shows up he's going to be weaker. So I feel like that really kind of turned into the Korean meta, and it kind of came from China. However, I think that the Chinese jungle meta right now is kind of non-existent in a sense, just because of the global gold rush top that again that streamlined to the inhibitors. But again, Kelsey, Drexen, expand on that farther.
Well, I will say that, yeah, maybe shutting down Meggy was a very easy way to shut down SKT, but it's actually the direction of the game right now, just in general. Like the whole reason, the whole reason the game is going the way it is in the terms of tower chicken is just because it's the safest thing for the junglers, and because if you fall behind in the jungle, you're obviously it's a huge snowball in competitive play compared to like solo queue or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think OMG could potentially take games off SKT. I mean SKT, but that's like I don't know what that's saying because I don't know if OMG could take games off Ozone at the moment. I mean
Yeah,
I love OMG, but like I don't really know. But I would really like to see that matchup.
yeah. I mean,
I know OMG is very strong. I'm not entirely convinced with the current state Ozone is in and how they were pretty much almost perfect against SKT. Because like okay, this is kind of going off topic of LPL, but on the topic of like OGN, like I don't even think SKT played like horribly. They just Ozone played so much better,
they
right?
got outclassed too.
So
I think.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
if we're talking about higher tier, I think. I mean, in my opinion, Najin White Shield and Samsung Galaxy Ozone are the two best teams in the world right now. I mean, yeah, are the actually they're those are the two best squads in the world right now, and I'm hesitant to say whether OMG would take a win off of those teams just because they've looked so strong in the past 2 weeks. It's not OMG looking weak. Again, it's not OMG looking weak at all. It's just that like Ozone whipping SK Telecom T1K was just it was basically a masterclass performance from multiple players, including Dandy and Mata on the side of Ozone, from that squad. So I mean,
I just
again,
see,
every game is so situational. So.
I just want to say I do want to really see Son and Loveland against Imp and Mata though, because I think that'd be a very fun match to watch.
Oh god, I think it would be a stomp. Did someone get murdered by
Mm,
him?
I don't know. Well, I don't want to say stomp. They might lose the lane though. For I don't know. It's so
Yeah,
hard to say. Like
just
this is all theoretical. I mean,
right.
there's just too many things to analyze.
I thought this word stomp like that's like my good word. That's like my if I say stomp they're like slightly lose lane. That's what I meant. So you can't take
So
anything I say seriously. But Kelsey, go ahead.
I do want to say that I think OMG is a team that, like, just watching their picks and ban phases and the way they tailor how they play to each team in the LPL, I think they're a team that researches heavily. And, like, even in the match against EDG, like, EDG obviously came out with a plan to go against them because they played differently. But the fact that OMG got both, like, the Twitch pick and the Ziggs pick from, like, you and Name is pretty big. And then things like, against LGD, they knew that there was going to be so much focus bottom because everyone thought, oh, okay, to beat OMG, we have to destroy their bottom lane, and Styes and Pyle will be able to snowball off of them if we have Quansley Sin. And then Clearlove just went, oh, okay, I'm just gonna gank for going, and he's just gonna like single-handedly destroy their entire team. But like they're able to understand how the enemy team is gonna play and adapt their styles. So we've seen OMG playing a style where they sort of stall out games and take like late. They have the second longest average game length in LPL right now, where they stall out games because they know they can beat teams late, like most teams late. But I think that we'll see something very different from them, from SK against SK Telecom, or even Fnatic or TPA or whoever represents North America. I think we'll see something different from them every single game. So that makes me very excited, and it also makes it very difficult for me to call like how they'll do.
I mean, if we're talking about something different, then those boys from TPA. Oh God. Oh my Lord. Oh, TPA. Anyways, yeah. I agree with you. The it's really gonna be it's important to realize how and I want to over exaggerate Kelsey's point. It's really important to realize how different these teams actually are. Like so many I've never been, even though people say oh, the meta is getting closer and closer and closer every day, and it kind of is and it kind of is people are generally playing the same champions. I would say that China was playing different champions earlier because they were on patch 2.15 or something like that. But the it's been a real, as someone obviously I'm taking a semester off college, so I have a little bit of time to watch these League of Legends games in my in my free time. And as someone who's been watching all 4 of the 5 leagues, it's been a real pleasure to see how differently each of these teams react to different situations, the mentality, almost the different fighting spirits of each team. It's been really nice to see, and that's what I think that's what League of Legends is about. League of Legends is like a canvas, and and canvas, the champions are the different thickness of the brushes, and you're just all these Chinese teams are painting away and stuff like that, and Korean teams will paint a beautiful, again, what I think is Korean teams will paint a beautiful Mona Lisa or something like that, and then Chinese and Southeast Asian teams will get a freaking paintball gun and start shooting the canvas and things, and call it abstract art. But
And then meanwhile we're finger painting here in NA.
Yeah.
To kind of
we're still squeezing the paint out of the tubes and stuff like that. We're still trying to develop our scene, which isn't a bad thing, but I think it'll come.
But on that beautiful metaphoric analysis by Hilo there from Moondoverse, I'm going to wrap it up. We have one question, because we're kind of pushing our time limit. We have one question from chat. They want us to know who you guys predict to win the NA LCS. Try to keep it concise a little bit, Hilo, with your painting metaphors. He's going to paint an actual picture of Cloud9 winning. Oh, wait, did I give mine away? No, I'm TSM for me.
I'll speak after you go.
Oh, God. Dude, I honestly don't know. I actually think it's going to be, Coast Gaming with their star mid laner Shifter. No, I'm joking. But, yeah, Shifter deserves a better team. Oh, my gosh.
I love Danny. He is so good.
Elo hell.
That boy, Danny Shifter Shapanya Lee, is a god. Anyways, what I will say about the NALCS, my heart tells me TSM, because I'm basically a TSM groupie at this point. But when I look at analytically, when I look at the play, Cloud9 outclasses a majority of the teams there, and I think it's going to be. In my heart of hearts, I want it to be Cloud9 TSM, but in my mind tells me that's going to be a Cloud9 CLG final. And just because TSM's strength from the previous, from this season has come from their game plan is essentially, what I think their game plan is essentially predicated on is that the strength of his lane, the strength of their individual lanes leads to them being able to not have to pucks around with any of their strategies. If your lanes are that dominant, then there's no need to you don't have to make up for anything. The reason why teams employ strategies is because they know that some of their lanes will lose, and how do I make up for those losses? How do I make up for those losses and try to shore up in other places, right? Across the board, TSM's lanes are all TSM players are all all-star level, top 2 in their respective positions. And even Odd One, I think Odd One is a top 2 player in the jungle position. So, at the same time though, wait, why are we all laughing? Is there something on my face?
No, I'm gonna Odd One. I'm gonna just frame that quote. Odd One is the top jungler from NA.
I said top
Hubo.
2. So
oh, excuse me. Top 2 jungler from NA. Framed.
He is a top 2 jungler.
For stream viewers?
No.
I'm just laughing because I'm reading chat. Anyway.
Yeah, I was reading chat too. I mean, Oddone is a top 2 jungler. What the hell?
I'm gonna give that to you for holiday. I'm gonna frame it. I'm gonna put it in a frame. I'm gonna give it to you, and you can hang it on your wall, and we'll say
I think
Odd One.
on the premise of stream viewers, that is correct.
Oh my god, you guys are so full of it. Like I think Odd One is top 2.
He's
Anyways,
been on the other side of the ocean for too long. He doesn't.
Almost catching
yes.
up to
I think he's
Meteos and that like
confusing
you know
Odd
Yeah.
One
30K
for like
number.
Meteos or Night Blue.
Uh-huh. And
Um,
oh, and you know, speaking of ocean, and I know this might not be the most relevant topic, but then if anyone who's watching this VOD, you know, please keep the prayers of some of the families of the drowned Korean students in your you know, keep them in your prayers and thoughts. I'm sure the whole, you know, the whole country will be very appreciative. Anyways, coming back to Odd One's top 2 status, but like what TSM has shown that it hasn't been able to adapt to, you know, for some reason they, like when teams go even in lane with them, like when CLG goes even in lane with them, when Cloud9 goes even in lane with them, and when Meteos basically at times outclasses what Odd One wants to do Odd One wants to do, then they've shown that they haven't been able to adapt, and that's very interesting to me. And I mean, it's, and like I think what I was having this conversation with a friend, and he was saying, "No, dude, it's because, you know, Cloud9 pulled out another cheese pick, and you know they picked freaking like Soraka mid. Who picked Soraka mid? By the way, Soraka mid is stomping solo queue right now, so you shut your mouth, friend." And also, like CLG, when in the famous CLG versus TSM game, in which like Wild Turtle like flashed into 5 people and went ham for some reason, CLG, like they didn't pick any awkward lanes, but then they knew exactly how to use their compositions. I'm not sure TSM knows how to, I believe that they do know how to use their compositions, but I'm not sure they know how to set up for the things that they want to do. Like the ward coverage is like a little bit lacking, positioning is a little bit lacking. There's a few things that TSM has to fix before they can, you know, go on that path. And it's, those are things that like they have to be told, like, yo, fix this. Five things
I'm
to
gonna
do
concise
today,
you,
right?
Hubo. CLG TSM. Yes.
Yeah, no,
Is that
yeah,
what we got
but
from there?
yeah,
We made
yeah,
it.
basically. But CLG, it's CLG C9 finals, and I think C9 is going to win it all.
CLG
That's what my
C9 for
mind tells me.
Hubo. Bam,
But
right there. Odd One
please,
fanboy.
please TSM. I hope you win.
Jackson Kelsey.
well, since retirement's coming soon, maybe you know Energy Pacemaker will move to NA and Odd One can sub in for jungle. Okay,
Oh
so
my god.
anyway, well,
Fucking
you know,
booping, dude. Fucking booping. Oh my goodness.
any
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge CLG fanboy. You can actually see I have the movie poster over there,
Oh
and
my god.
yeah, man. So now my mic's never gonna be even again because I balanced it on a soda can. But anyway, so yeah, I want to say CLG will win, but Cloud9 will definitely be the highest chance of winning, I feel, and that's just because their rotations are so crisp. Like everything they do just feels so predetermined. Like they seem like they have a game plan and they go in and stick with it. CLG is kind of like that, but really shaky, and you never really know what's going to come out of like Nien. And
Ugh.
yeah, I don't know. He's kind of inconsistent for them, and I think that's kind of like an issue. I have nothing against Nien, by the way. It's just how I personally feel.
I mean,
And
Nien is bad. Like, that's
well,
what we're saying, right? Nien is bad because he is bad. Like, thank you as a
You
CEO. Like, I
can't rep
just
Odd One and then go and rep Nian or like rip
anyway,
Nian down.
anyway, no, I don't know. I'll say that like I would maybe normally say TSM versus Cloud9, except for the performance ever since Bjergsen's been back. Oddly enough, just haven't really shown that TSM's very strong. Well, okay, maybe that's an overstatement, but yeah, uh, yeah, I can't argue with C9 versus CLG. They're the two that play the most correct as far as focusing on winning the game rather than many of the silly things the other teams tend to focus on in North America. Um, they also seem like the least likely to lose the game to Baron. So I think that's a huge deal because Baron is the strongest person or the strongest being in both LPL and LCS. So
I know that they already did one. Like, I know that a fan already did one like a pretty long time ago. But they really need to make a champion spotlight for Baron Nashor, the terror of the Rift, because this guy's just. I mean, like when this Baron Nashor guy is in the conversation, he just tears through people. Like, god damn, I've seen so many. Like, I've never seen so many. Even in EU LCS, I think that the top quality play in EU LCS is worse than in the than that of North America. But I don't even in the EU LCS, I don't see nearly as many Baron throws as I see in the NALCS. Like, god damn, it's not even like while Baron is being auto attacked and then a throw, it's positioning around Baron, and somehow you throw while you're on different sides of the Baron pit. I just don't understand. It's really interesting.
So, okay. Yeah, and I wrote an article about Baron recently, about LPL and Baron. Yeah, Lolly Sports. Anyway,
Yeah,
plug in that shamelessly.
shameless self-promotion.
NALCS. I'm gonna grab your plug.
NALCS.
Go.
Okay.
I was actually looking for you because I'm a good person, but
Mine's gonna be
someone
like
else do it.
someone's gonna be. I'm gonna try to be briefer than both of them, and I'm going to say that I agree with the C9 CLG finals, and I think C9 will win. But I think this is like a really really boring thing to say because everyone said it. I think CLG will win summer finals because they have
Please, the dream.
the dream because they
Please.
have they have
yeah.
like strong individual players and like C9 pseudo rotation, so they have. I'm not gonna say that word, but they can. But they, but they can grow. I think into this little baby
So much
CLG
talent,
team.
dude.
Yeah. Oh God. Whereas
But-
I think TSM has like strong individual players, but not as strong of like rotation as C9, and C9 doesn't have as strong of individual players as TSM.
So much untapped power, but I'm gonna cut it there because we are drifting into the NA. Which, by the way, now we're gonna do our plugins. Runeterra report. Huge shout out again to Moondiverse giving us the platform to do this. Hubo in the middle representing them as the Moondiverse editor. Obviously, he has a lot to say and he's very good at saying it. So definitely check him out. Yeah. Hubo.
I hate you, Froskirin.
No,
you better send me that holiday gift card. With my,
It'll be
all my
wrapped in
quotations on
everything.
it. Oh, God.
Check out the Runeterra report. They also do the NA, EU. I hear there's a GPL one. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear it is around. Other plugins, obviously, we have Drexen, Mike here from Gosu Gamers. Kelsey, also a member of Gosu Gamers, a member representing LoL Esports here, however, on this panel.
And Moondiverse.
And Moondiverse. She's like the collection of all three, yes. Do you guys have any plugin shout-outs that you want to put in?
As someone who is involved with the management of, and I know that LPL is our fastest growing program, and that might be that one of the reasons might be because because people want to know more about the Chinese scene, right? But as someone who's involved with the making and the process of other of the shows for other regions, right now because of some of the feedback we've gotten. Also, I'm working on getting a new job, so that's kind of been on my plate. But because of some of the feedback we've gotten, there are some things I've wanted to change. And really, I mean, if you have any like complaints or questions, you can send it. I'm on Reddit all the time, so you can send a message to Soldra, spelled like you see it on the screen, without the XD. But then, really, I mean, I promise that we will bring out other episodes. We're just having a hard time now because basically there are some format changes we want to make. After seeing Froskirin's wonderful performances, there are some things we have to tell the other panels. So, I mean, it's the Runeterra report is coming, just like winter. So, I hope you guys are waiting for that, and thank you very much for being patient.
And also just like Half-Life 3.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's true. Yeah.
Anyway, are you done?
I am done. I don't appreciate the Half-Life 3 comment, especially since I've been
Hey man, I'm kidding. I know you've been working.
I've been
really
You're
hard.
winding him up again.
I just
I've
like
been
the
fooled
Pokemon,
once
man.
by that. Oh God, I want that game so badly. It's
Yeah.
unreal.
Okay, so, well, I guess I'll do my shoutouts. First of all, if you want to see my coverage of LPL, you can follow my Twitter, which is probably the best way you're going to find it, which is Ripple name because I'm shadow banned, so you won't see me on Reddit for a while, probably.
Oh, are you serious? Oh, you're part of the Shadow Band too?
Yeah, man. Me and Kelsey
What?
both, actually.
Oh, for real?
So, yeah, if you want to see my stuff, you'll probably see it there. Maybe some other kind soul will submit my content. I recently did a World Elite interview that you might want to check out on Ghost of Gamers, so shout out to them.
Very good.
We'll have an
It's a very
OMG
good
one coming soon. Thank you. Shout out to Kelsey because I missed her all weekend while she was at PAX. I had no to talk to about Deep Leagues stuff. So shout out to Kelsey. Shout out to Pepsi because allegedly in May they're releasing Baja Blast outside of Taco Bell. So they definitely deserve a mention. Yeah. I guess that's really it. And also, follow Mundoverse and Runeterra Report and stuff. I've liked being on the show for a while and hope we can continue to produce quality content and feed you guys insight on the Chinese scene. So,
Yeah, and so my shoutouts, like all the sites pretty much have been covered except for lolesports.com. I'm the only person covering LPL for lolesports.com right now, so chances are if you see something LPL related to Lolly Sports, it's me. Just in general, I love LPL, so like if there's anything about LPL that you guys are interested in, or if you like make something and want me to look at it, I'm happy to look at it. I don't know, I like LPL, and I like people who make LPL stuff, so that's kind of my thing. Also,
You hear that, gentlemen? If you wanna attract the ladies, all you gotta do is watch the LPL. That's a surefire way to start a conversation in a bar.
the mechanics in the APM, man.
So I hear you like Name.
yeah, so that's pretty much my deal, and I don't like Baja Blast, but that's all I got. So
I don't like Baja Blast
Oh
either.
my god.
I'm gonna cut you there on your Baja Blast. Again, I cannot
Wait.
emphasize. Oh wait, Drexen.
I just wanted to say that if you don't have time to watch the LPL, which is probably why you're watching this to get caught up with everything quickly, I do kind of want to end the segment with a game that I do think everyone should watch every week that we do this, and mostly based on entertainment factor more so than anything else. So if you had to watch any game from the LPL this week, and I'll plug a link into the chat actually for where you can get HD VODs, is make sure to watch EDG versus Positive Energy Game 1, because that is by far the funnest game to watch, and you watch that and you'll see why you can get hooked on LPL just for the sheer possibility of that shit happening. So I will get a link and post it. But other than that, I just wanted to interject and say that because,
No,
I guess I should share the best
idea.
with
Otherwise, obviously on the bottom of the screen, we have Mundoverse's Facebook and the Runeterra Report, respectively. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter. Again, they're the platform that brings this all together. And again, to emphasize, the panel that we do have for the Runeterra Report, it kind of seems like a little dinky project right now, but you have to think that we have Gosu Gamers, which, as far as just an organization independently, huge LPL coverage. They do a great job there. They have live match tickers, so that's fantastic. I know Reddit was really excited about that. Mundoverse, again, their LPL situation is growing. They're offering this, so obviously they're looking at expanding their content. And the fact that we also have the LoL esports, like, this is the only LoL esports specialist. So a really fantastic job. Just this whole panel is pretty much everything LPL related comes across these guys' desks. Like anything that you ever find on Reddit, chances are they've touched it or they've manufactured it at some point. Otherwise, I'm signing off. We'll do episode 3. It is weekly. I believe we're going to try to keep the same time period if it fits Hubo's sleeping schedule.
Lord.
But otherwise, I'm Frostgrin. I'm part of the NESL. You can catch me on Go for LoL Sundays. I specifically do EU West. But otherwise, have a good night, guys.
See
Good
ya.
night.